Well, when Karen asked if I could come today, she asked if I would speak. She didn't say anything about any awards, so thank you.
Wanted it to be a surprise.
I feel like Gary did in saying when you're part of something so much bigger than yourself, it's quite humbling to be singled out as the one being recognized. And I appreciate that you mentioned the 9/11 exhibit. We have Lindsay and so many of you I know were here volunteering or at the event volunteering. And I was just talking with the ladies before we started that my favorite part of that entire exhibit was the fact that hundreds of volunteers made it happen. It wasn't any one person or even one group of people. We had school groups and service clubs, and we had leadership academies, and we had young cadets, and we had a flight from Hill Air Force Base come out, and we just had so many different people with the PTA and just a lot of people involved. I think our community is hungry for opportunities to come together. And I will tell you what really got me today is reading through this on the American's Creed, to be reminded that it is my duty to my country to love it. And I can say that's exactly why I'm here today. It's why my life looks like it does today, even though it doesn't look like I thought it would look at all. October is a really reflective time for me and my kids, because October was the last time we ever had Brent alive before November came. And so as the weather changes, as fall break comes, we just walk right through those last steps. My kids and I spent some time up at my grandpa's property up near Monte Cristo this past weekend when they had the old UEA days off. I still call it UEA. And it's an A-frame cabin with a potbelly stove, and it was cold Thursday and Friday. And so we were there Thursday night, and we built a big fire before we went to bed, and about 3 in the morning that fire wasn't working anymore. And so I got up and I'm like, I would rather be the one out of bed making this fire than laying in my bed wishing there were a fire. So I got up and started building a fire, and behind this potbelly stove, of course, there's logs and wood stacked that we keep there, and then to the side is a box of old newspapers that we use to try to get the fire going. And some of the wood was a little wet, so it took a lot of newspaper. And it was 3 in the morning, and I was reading through these newspapers. Like many of you in the room, I am naturally drawn to history, even if the history is fairly recent. And most of these newspapers were from 2016 and 2017, which is, of course, while my husband was serving as mayor of North Ogden. And if any of you remember tracking him during his life, he was in the paper in those days as much as I'm in the paper these days. And it was really an emotional experience to see these newspapers from only 4 or 5 years ago and think how different our world is today. I've said before, it's only been 3 years since my husband was killed. It's been almost 4 since he deployed. I'm not sure he would recognize this place. He never lived through masks and vaccine mandates. He never lived through pandemic and working from home. He certainly never homeschooled 7 kids at a time, I will tell you that. So I just think of my mansion on the other side. It's going to be really nice when I get there. It's only been a few years, and yet so much is happening at such a fast pace. And I think that's where I feel this compulsion to really pick up where he left off with this devotion to our country. And I can tell you it's a shared devotion. I see what's happening in the world right now, particularly with Afghanistan in this last month or 2. And as we got to that 20th anniversary of 9/11, which was also the 20th anniversary of the global war on terrorism, and the 3rd anniversary of my husband's death, all these just, dates ringing in my head, and starting to think about the fact that I'm here because 18 years ago I fell in love with a man who was already in love with the country that I had loved since I was a little kid. And some of you might have heard me say this before, but I first fell in love with America and the American dream when I was 10. I remember very clearly being in a 5th grade class, and part of the 5th grade curriculum is American history, American government, all the kinds of things, the American dream. I lived in Omaha, Nebraska at the time, and I had a teacher who was great at tying in current events to the history lesson in our book, which we still had books back then. My kids don't even know what a book is anymore, like a history book. And we would turn through the pages of the book, and then he brought in a TV, which my kids also would not recognize because it was a tube TV, and it was fatter than it was wide, not flat, fat. And at that time, very timely for today's news about Colin Powell, I was a 5th grader during the Gulf War. And so Desert Storm was happening overseas we were learning about American history, and in my class in Omaha, Nebraska, was a 10-year-old boy named Abdullah. And his family had just emigrated as political refugees from Afghanistan. So if you don't think the whole world has come full circle in my life in the past couple of months, I think back to how I fell in love with the American dream because of that 10-year-old foreigner. Because of that boy who didn't have American Revolution history in his blood, but he was still a human being who craved what the American Revolution offered mankind. I fell in love with patriotism, not as an arrogance or a superiority, but an awareness of my responsibility to honor and to serve and to defend freedom, not just here at home, but wherever human beings live. Because everything we pledge allegiance to, or everything in that preamble of the Constitution, everything in the Declaration of Independence, isn't just owned by America. We believe them to be God-given rights for the human race. And so I never would have known as a young child that I would end up married to a deceased soldier. But I knew I loved this country enough to say yes, if that's the path my life would take. Now, of course, none of us know the paths our life would take, which is good, because none of us would really want to have to choose all those details. But I can look back to when I first met Brent Taylor and being kind of shocked and a little bit annoyed that he was more patriotic than me. Because I'd always been the most patriotic person I know. I love this country, and I loved America, and I loved Lee Greenwood, and I loved everything. But I never thought I'd marry a soldier. Because I was going to marry like a lawyer, I don't know, not a soldier, a bishop maybe or something. And then I fell in love with this man who had this dream to serve in the military. We were dating in 2003, not long after the terrorist attacks of 2001. And it was right March 19th of 2003 when the war in Iraq began that sealed the deal for him. There was no more hemming and hawing. Signed up as quick as he could. We got engaged on a Saturday. We walked hand in hand into enlist on a Tuesday right after. We were married 3 months later, and 4 months after that, he went to boot camp. So our entire life together, even before we were legally married, was service to our God, our family, and our country. And so when he died, and it felt like every light within me went out, and everything was just destroyed and despondent, it also caused a really unexpected awakening of that renewal, of that patriotism, of that commitment to the American dream that doesn't just belong to me. And who am I to say that it wouldn't be my soldier paying that ultimate sacrifice, when of course it has to be someone's. And when I've loved and honored those who serve and those who died in the line of duty, and we had a neighbor in 2012 that we did it was actually 2009, we did a community ceremony for them because their son died in Afghanistan, and we wanted to make sure the neighbors knew. Their whole family was from California, so the burial took place back home, but many of the family members now live in Utah. So we helped plant a tree at the park and put a plaque, and my husband officiated the ceremony in his uniform because we've loved this country so much and the principles for which it stands. So then November 3rd came. It was a Saturday morning, the first Saturday in November. We just finished an awful year. I'm not going to lie, 2018 was worse for me than 2020 for most of you. My husband had deployed. I had a 2-month-old baby, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old. Our house flooded. We got displaced. We had to live in temporary housing. We had to argue with the insurance to get the house rebuilt. I mean, everything just kept going wrong to the point that I thought, I can't do this anymore. And then the end of October came, and I thought, I almost don't have to do this anymore. Because by the time you reach Halloween, you know what's right around the corner? Thanksgiving and Christmas, and time goes like that. And January was when Brent was expected home. So once we made it to Halloween, which is my birthday, I thought we'd made it. And I'm like, oh, good heavens, we've survived the worst hell of my entire life. And I have all these life lessons I've learned, and I thought someday I'll speak in church about what I've learned during this deployment. And then life really happened that first Saturday in November. And I found out Brent would be coming home in a very unexpected fashion. But rather than letting that light be snuffed out like a candle in the night, my kids and I, my husband's parents and I, our entire community have chosen to just pick up that torch and run with it. Even if sometimes running is actually just crawling. Because there are days when it feels like it's hard to see that light and it's hard to take that step. But then I think of organizations like yours and the history you celebrate and the heritage that is ours as daughters of the American Revolution. And it's ours to be shared as members of the human race, of men and women who for generations have loved country and principle more than themselves, willing to lay down their lives so that someone else could live happily ever after. And I think the true purpose of the American dream is to help each of us know how to live happily even after, rather than happily ever after. Even after war, even after death, even after cancer, even after everything terrible that this life just seems to throw in our faces, the American dream is the ability to hope, to stand up again, to remember those who have fallen and then get back up because we know they had the courage to do so, and so can we. And that's what's now turned into this foundation of ours that I never really set out to start a foundation. I haven't had a job since before my oldest daughter was born 16 years ago. Really good at PTA and church callings, but I don't know how to run a nonprofit. But I know how to love this country. And I know how to love my fellow men. And I know how to take your love and your love and your love for your country and your fellow men and bring it together and say, then let's do something about it. And that's what I feel we've had the opportunity to do. Right around the corner is Veterans Day. I hope you're all involved. I see on your agenda that you've got the calendar of events. We've got a Field of Honor flags going up in a couple of weeks. We hope you'll sponsor a service member on one of those. There's a link on our website, MajorBrentTaylor.com. For $25, you get to sponsor a flag. It's got a beautiful tag dedicated to whomever. You can sponsor 1 or 1,000,000, and then you can keep the flag at the end, or if you don't have the need for the flag, then we can hang on to the flag. But we'll put them in front of Pleasant View City Hall like we did last year. We hope to have 500 of those. So help us spread the word. We're having a Veterans Day devotional the first Sunday of November. We've done it every year for the past couple of years. It's beautiful. It's outside, it's cold. It's at the Barker Park Amphitheater in North Ogden, so bring your camp chairs and bring your blankets. But it's at 4 o'clock before it gets too cold. We're going to hear from a Marine this year. He's a former gunnery sergeant that served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of combat experience. He now trains Navy SEALs, and he's going to come talk to us about what we, on the civilian side, can do to best honor our veterans, whether they're past or present. So it's going to be a wonderful first weekend of November, in spite of the personal turmoil that started all of this. I'm proud to be a part of a community that loves this country, that loves these principles, that recognizes we're not a perfect nation. None of us ever said we were, for crying out loud, but we work to be more perfect as a union. More perfect today, more perfect tomorrow. I hope more perfect in my children's generation than my own. But that's on us, and I know that's what I love about all of you, that you're here for the next generation and the next generation. It's not just what we want our children to know, but it's what we want our grandchildren to feel. We want their children to know and their children to feel, and then to act upon what they know and act upon what they feel. So we've had a wonderful journey with the Major Brent Taylor Foundation. I don't know where it's going next. I know we've given out 11 scholarships to young people who are very service leadership minded. A couple of them at the University of Utah, a couple of them at Brigham Young University, a couple at Weaver High School, and a couple down at Chandler, Arizona, where my husband served as student body president in 1997. I've got some great goals and ambitions for future scholarship opportunities. We're trying to expand it to Weber State this year. And we've got a scholarship fundraiser that same weekend, the first weekend of November. It's kind of our Memorial weekend. You can learn about that on our website. After we get to these different universities, we also want to expand the scholarships to a couple of different fields that were really important to my husband. One of those is public service. There are a lot of great elected officials in this state who really have no training in statesmanship, because for some reason as Americans we don't like professional politicians. Now I get that, because you don't want anybody to be a professional politician because it's like a dirty word, but wouldn't you want a professional dentist fixing your teeth or a professional doctor delivering your baby? So I think there's room for some of that technical education among our great elected officials in this state. So we want to have a scholarship for any of those that might be choosing to go back to school and maybe learn some public administration, maybe learn accounting and budgeting on the technical formal education side to mix that in with their love of community and be better public servants. So that's one of the expansions we're looking forward to. Another one that we're really looking forward to has to do with public employees. The guys that fix the sewer line, the guys that take care of our parks and our roads and our city infrastructure and amenities. My husband loved how hard all of them work and liked providing many of them with an opportunity to increase their formal education. Again, if you've got a guy that works on the water line and he knows every detail about that city underground, imagine what greater service he can do with the formal education side of it. Now, obviously I'm biased. When I did work once upon a time, I was a school teacher, so I think formal education is just such a beautiful thing. So we want to expand to public elected officials, to public employees, and then a couple of things that are near and dear to me and my husband. I'll just take a quick minute. I can't help but notice your beautiful shirts. This month is October, breast cancer awareness. I mentioned my birthday is Halloween. My stepsister's birthday is November 1st. I planned to go visit her. I was going to leave late on Halloween and spend the night and visit her for a quick minute and leave because she is battling breast cancer. And the battle's not going well. And I got a text this morning from her husband saying, I probably shouldn't come. She might not make it to her birthday. My mother was a widow at age 36, not to the military and not to cancer. My father died by suicide. And so there are different things that are near and dear to me and my husband. My husband lost his little brother to suicide as well. So as we grow our scholarship programs, I would like to be able to offer scholarships to children who've lost a parent to something. And maybe it was suicide or maybe it was cancer. There's a lot of wonderful scholarship opportunities for kids like mine that lose a parent in war. I mean, my kids can go to Harvard 5 times over, and I'm grateful for that. But when my mom was a widow to suicide, the 4 kids of us, it's a lucky any of us even got out of high school. And so we'd like to be able to offer that to some single parent families where that dynamic is just so hard. And then particularly to the suicide loss, which just opens a whole other layer of difficulty, of emotional struggle. There's not a lot of scholarships for kids whose parents kill themselves. And yet those kids might need that support maybe more than my kids do as a military survivor. So there's a lot of great good I know we can do in Brent's name, in his honor, in honor of all those who went before him. I know it's not his legacy I carry, but it's the legacy he carried from so many before him that we just continue to carry. And that's what the Major Brent Taylor Foundation stands for. We train, we honor, and engage. We do all of that in the name of service-oriented leadership. And the reason we do this goes right back to this beautiful creed, because I know for Brent Taylor and for me, and I hope for my children, we feel a very strong belief that it is our duty to love our country. And I leave that with you with such gratitude for your help and support, and this honor is just really overwhelming. Thank you. I love all of you. I look forward to continuing to work with you in this beautiful community of ours here in Weber and Davis County. Thank you.